All right. Hope everyone had a good lunch. So we're here with the second, we call it a roundtable, I think it's more of a panel, but doesn't matter. What's important is that this is the first time we do a session about investment in games in Romania. Even more generally speaking, it's the first time we do an investor track at Dev.Play, which is great. And I'll tell the story about how I got this idea. And it involves some people here in the panel. But before that, thanks everyone for being here. Let's start. I'll introduce myself. My name is Catalin Butnariu. I'm the president of the Romanian Game Developers Association and founder of Dev.Play. And my wonderful partner in crime for this panel is Zuzanna Kurek from Cornerstone Communications.
We are a company specialized in investor relations. We work with companies that are looking for capital. We connect them with investors. We bring companies to the capital markets. I hope soon. That's my soft spot, actually. We keep looking for the first gaming studio to list on the Bucharest Stock Exchange. So hopefully this will happen soon. And thank you so much, Catalin, for having us. We're a long-term friend of Romanian Game Developers Association, together with Ludwig Sobolewski. So looking forward to discussing important subjects today. Okay, so how we got the idea to do this track. It actually had to do with the news that was announced earlier this year that Critique Gaming has raised a significant amount of cash from a group of Romanian investors, which I'm not sure. I don't think it was the first time that this happened, but it certainly prompted me to think that maybe, okay, now it's a good time to do investment-related sessions at Dev.Play, and let's do one that is focused on Romania, actually. So with this in mind, I will ask our panelists to introduce themselves and briefly tell us what they do. So we have 3 investors here and 2 startups. So let's start from this side.
I mean, first of all, we should just all be clear that the room was empty from the very beginning, so it's not, it's not connected to stuff that we said along the way. My name is Andrei Gemeneanu. I'm the founder and managing partner of a private equity fund called Morphosis Capital. Morphosis invests tickets of 5 to 10 million euros in high-growth Romanian SMEs with international potential. Technology is one of our focus sectors. We have recently completed a tech investment in a Romanian company in RPA, Robotic Process Automation, a company called Doc.Process, with phenomenal international potential. I'm excited about the sector you guys are in. I see a lot of opportunities, so I came to learn more and obviously to meet some of you guys.
Hi, I'm Alexandru Bogdan. I am a member of Roca X, which is a fresh investment fund on the stage. We invest tickets between 50,000 and 500,000. It's an earlier stage for the startups. We are focused on technology, not only in Romania, but also in Europe. And actually, I discovered a lot more about the gaming industry in these few hours that I've been here than explored in my last 10 years. So looking forward to learn more about what it's bringing you all together here in this event.
Hello, I'm Malin. I'm an entrepreneur. I have a software company and a business angel. And I'm the chairman of Tech Angels, which is the eldest and largest angels organization in Romania.
My name is George Lemnaru. I'm CEO and the founder of Green Horse Games. We're building mobile games for football, for sports fans audience. Right now focusing on football and looking forward to American football. So if you're passionate about football, check out our games or apply to a job at Green Horse Games.
Hi, I'm David Moscovici. I'm a founder and the game and narrative designer for Critique Gaming. We do meaningful, meaty games that look at serious topics. I'm here as evidence that a indie studio looking for serious growth is investable. And thanks for having me.
Well, thanks, guys. So great to have you here. So let's dive into this. Zuzanna, I'll let you lead the way.
I would like to start with the investors part because actually we've been with the Dev.Play already 2 years ago, and I was part of the Bucharest Stock Exchange. But the thing is, back then there were basically not yet investment funds existing in Romania, locally based, apart from 3TS that actually invested in Green Horse Games. So we could not have actually done this panel, I think, last year or 2 years, because now we have Roca X, we have Morphosis Capital, so we have 2 new players on the looking to invest in Romanian SMEs. And I would like to start actually with you and also with asking you, Malin, what are you looking for when you invest in a company? Because this is something what we try to accomplish with this panel is to get 3 different types of investment funds, because you, Malin, acting as a business angel, aligning, pooling money, sometimes also together with other entrepreneurs. Roca X is targeting, I would say, startups in Romanian startups, and with Morphosis we are talking about more advanced companies with a higher revenue and also a EBITDA rate. So basically, if you could share with us what you are looking for in terms of revenues, what indicators you look at, what is your investment strategy?
Just a correction to start with. Before 3TS invested in Green Horse Games, there was an angel there, myself. So what I'm looking for, first of all, I'm looking for the team. So I think from my point of view, this is the most important part. My experience was that many times founding team had to pivot from whatever they started with. Therefore, it's less important what is, what is the product they're pitching, what is the business plan, and so on. They'll pivot anyway. So, so the main point is the team. For the stage I'm investing in, what I want to see is they validated as many assumptions as possible. And validating assumptions means, can be whatever, from having all the figures you need in terms of traction, revenues, and so on, to whatever they deem validated. But then this would probably affect valuation. So as they have more validated assumptions, they could expect a higher valuation. If they are earlier in the game, they have higher risk associated with them, then probably the valuation will be lower.
Do you have the valuation range, or did you look at?
Yeah, but the range is very large.
Okay. Alex?
Okay, so apart what Malin said, because he's always active in an earlier stage, we tend to look at the MVPs. We want to feel the MVPs. We want to understand what is the differentiator that the new idea brings to the market, and to get a feel of how much traction that would bring into the investments. Probably I should pass it over to you to say the next level.
No, look, I mean, there's always with investments, there's a left brain and a right brain dimension to the dynamic. From a left brain point of view, we obviously look at the sector first, and something that I found interesting about your sector it got to being, at this point in time globally, roughly $150 billion in size. That's nearly 4 times bigger than the movie box office revenue sector, or 3 times bigger than the sports management revenue sector. So, you know, obviously you're in a sector that's going places. I also liked a lot a quote from the CEO of Netflix that said that he's a lot more worried about losing, and he's actually losing much more to Fortnite than he is to HBO, you know, because at the end of the day, everybody's competing for people's time and attention. So sector dynamics is something that we pay a lot of attention to. Then when it comes to the companies, we're typically looking for a fit with our strategy. And like I said, our strategy is to invest in Romanian companies with international potential. The 4 partners, founders of Morphosis, we spent the biggest part of our careers outside Romania. I spent 15 years working abroad in 7 different countries in Europe, Asia, and the US. So we're always looking for that international angle. And that's really also where we try to add value, because I think in today's world, it's good for investors and founders as well to assume that capital is commodity, and really what makes the difference is the value add, you know. And as an investor, we like to be hands-on and to partner with the companies and really try to unlock new opportunities, new markets, go international and stuff like that. So there's all of that is, let's call it the left brain side. And then obviously, as my fellow panelists have touched on, the human connection is very important. You know, I always like to say that I wouldn't like to invest in a company where I don't feel I could go for dinner with the founder or with the founders. You know, there's just got to be that human connection, because this means you have common values, you know, common ambitions. And because we are looking for companies that have the potential to go international, it's, you know, we're always looking at a complex and tough journey in front of us, and always sort of tough journeys test human relations. So it's important to start on the right, you know, on the right note.
Now, I think one of the important questions is, okay, so we have investors at the table, we have entrepreneurs on the other side. How did you get to find your investors? Because this is one of the biggest questions I think that entrepreneurs have. Okay, I need capital. Let's say I have a sound business plan. My business is already a few years old. How did it happen in your case as somehow an inspirational story for the others? Like, did the investor approach you? Were you actively looking for investors? David, how was?
Well, I'm not going to be inspirational. I'm going to be useful instead, and say that you have to constantly keep pitching if you believe in what you're pitching. And you need to collect every no as a trophy and get a wonderful display case of being turned down, and learning from each of those steps. Learn what you need to change, learn what your weaknesses are, and shore them up. It's inspirational when it pays off eventually from all of that, but it's a lot about the grittiness of just going through each one. And although you're worried about like your company's future, you're focused on building a better answer for next time, a better business for next time, and keep going at it. And quite simply, even investors will look at your endurance, the fact that you're still looking 6 months later, a year later, and that you've made improvements is part of the right answer. So I think like just what's useful for people in the audience thinking about looking for investments is get your stamina ready for that sort of a learning experience.
How many investors did you meet before you found the one? Or
I don't know,
few
we're
of them?
talking many dozens of pitches in various contexts.
Okay, so you don't even remember, actually.
There's no, yeah.
Yeah. And Georgia, in your case?
You might think that when you're a CEO of a gaming startup, you're building games. You might do that in your spare time. Problem is that you need, most of the time you need to go out there and meet a lot of people. And that's what I did. I wasn't very happy. I'm not very happy to meet people, to be honest. I would love to just to stay in the product, but that's what you have to do. And then it gets even worse because you need to do a lot of HR. So, okay, but that's just me complaining. So, get out there, go to those kind of conferences, participate in pitching competitions, go and meet investors. In my case, if we're talking about the angel investment, that was about five years ago, when there weren't so many opportunities of investment as there are now. I met more people, more investors, and one of the investors that wasn't a match because they were looking for bigger investments, bigger company to invest in, recommended me to Malin and the other way around, so made the connection. So that's how it happened with when I got our angel investment.
And Malin,
what I wanted to say is, if in George's case, some 5-6 years ago, whatever, it was quite difficult to find some other investors, and we had to struggle on that a bit. For Dev, it looked, things were smoother in terms of he went for a presentation, for a pitch to our group, to Tech Angels, 1 year, and he came back 1 year after. And what happened for the second pitch, there were some people interested, and we just syndicated the deal. So it was, I think it took, what, a couple of months or something, but not too much. So it happened quite fast once he was on, or we thought he was on the right track. So it was a totally different story, totally opposite somehow. But this somehow is showing that the maturity level of angel investment and so on in Romania increased dramatically in the last 5-6 years.
So I want to follow up on this because we've talked a little bit about how startups meet investors and how investors are looking for companies. So let's move to the next step. How is the relationship? So how much do you guys get involved? Because obviously you provide companies with money, so that's sort of a given. What happens besides the money? And from the startup perspective, how do you see the relationship with the investor? I mean, I know a lot of studios are sort of scared to get funding because they are afraid they will lose control or things like this. So how was that experience for you? And how do you as investors want to get involved with the companies? And yeah, go ahead. We can.
Okay. So first of all, about how we want to get involved, not just financially, but first we need to debate a bit about how well prepared are some of the startups to receive those investments. Because even though they don't come just as a cash support, they come with the knowledge, they come with the introductions, as Malin presented, so opportunities to find new investors, opportunities to find additional customers, key customers, or distributions in the case of gaming. This support also comes with the need of control for the investment. So what happens is that in some cases, startups are not yet prepared to offer the transparency and to see the investor as the right partner to share with. They tend to say, okay, I have a great idea, I need the money, I'll do that, but you just need to hear the news about me. So with this respect, I think we, in the middle, and also the agents, we have an important role to also educate the new startups to understand how this partnership can go further and how they can benefit more from this partnership apart from the actual cash they receive.
Well, from my point of view is I'm trying to get involved usually, especially if I'm the lead investor. If I'm just a follower, I don't get involved too much. So basically I have here both cases. However, even when I get involved, I believe I'm not too intrusive. And there is one point I would like to stress is when a business angel invests in a startup, he's already having the skin in the game, sometimes more than the founders and definitely more than any fund, because he puts his own money in there. So once he's in the game, he just wants that game to be a success more than everybody else. So therefore, he will help if he can.
That's a very solid point. I mean, a lot of common sense in what you said, and very easily explained. I think people should realize that an investor wants also the best for the company.
As I said, sometimes more than the founders. Maybe the founder has in plan to build up a new startup, or I don't know what he wants to do. He wants to go on the beach, but my money are in there already. So for me, it's important to have a success.
I think at this stage it's also important between what actually you've mentioned before, what Andrei mentioned about being able to take dinner actually with the company, with the founder of the company he invests in, because it's about mutual relationship and also a lot of respect for not necessarily, I mean, for the money as well, but also for the trust that the investors actually put in the business, because it's oftenly we see like one side of the entrepreneur, which is very valid. Entrepreneurs usually, I've noticed, are scared of losing control or being pressured into, I don't know, maybe giving up on their vision or journey just for the purpose of maximizing profits. And I think the dialogue actually here between the expectations of the investors from the very first day is very important to make sure that you're on the same page, basically.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. From my point of view, it's important to set up all the control instruments that the fund will later on ask. Like, I don't know, we set up a board, we have all these clauses like drag, tag, liquidated preferences, and so on and so forth. Reason being to have the startup ready for the next round. Usually, there are long discussions about why do you need drag? What happens if you try to drag me? And I don't know. But these discussions are, or in my experience, they always were reasonable. And as long as people, are logically thinking, I believe there is no, risk. And what happens, or my experience is so far that every time we signed the full-blown sort of shareholders agreements similar to what the funds are asking. So whenever 3TS occurred, everything was ready. So we just had to negotiate some minor items, basically.
And what about you? What about you guys? How was the relationship from your perspective?
We were talking about the difference between getting investment now and getting investment 5 or 6 years ago. Let me tell you about the difference between now and 2006, when I got my first investment in a previous startup, gaming startup. So during those times, the investor was usually getting most of the shares of the company, so like owning the company. And now things are getting
okay, I see.
in a completely different way, and but still this mentality, my people have this mentality that the investor is the boss, and that's why you treat him like a boss and you don't want a boss. And much more healthy is to treat him and build that relationship with him as a partner. An extra partner in which you get, in which you have more responsibility. At the end of the day, your responsibility is to get as higher return of investment for that investor who trusted your business and trusted you in the end. So that's the healthiest way. In our case now, every investor and as every entrepreneur, it's different. So you can build different relationships with your investors. And in Malin's case, I was from the start. I was proactively looking forward to keep him updated on a monthly basis. I thought that I considered, and I do consider, that it's very important for your investor to understand what's happening in your business, what are the opportunities and what are your challenges. And I was doing this like a formal thing. Besides this, I discovered that it's very healthy for my brain health also to speak with him. So I was calling him every once or once every one week or every 2 weeks or so. Like I think he was offering some psychological help there. So it did help. Yeah.
If I may elaborate a bit on what he said, definitely the investors should not be treated as bosses, and they should be partners. But one thing that maybe, and we met this phenomenon in the other fund that we have, which is for companies in distress. Founders find it difficult, maybe culturally, to reach out when they have difficulties. So it's very important for the founders to keep the investors and their support close, and to keep this open dialogue constantly, in order to benefit at the maximum of the support that the investors can provide to them.
Before we jump to David, I have a question for Andrei, because I know that when we discussed about Morphosis, you've been always underlining the partnership model actually that you have with your companies. And what, apart from the capital, because capital is, I like to think that an external investment is 50% capital, 50% brain power, let's say, another brain that the founder can or look for psychological support, basically. This is also very important when you run a business. Andrei, what do you think are other aspects that you can offer to companies?
Well, look, first of all, the way we think of ourselves, and if you want our philosophy as a fund, we call it private equity with a human touch. Because in a way, the private equity industry globally has been transforming a lot in recent years. Obviously, it's in the very, very early days in Romania. But, you know, going from being perceived as, I don't know if you guys heard of a book called The Barbarians at the Gate, which is how private equity was described in America in the 1980s, to really sort of coming along and being a real partner. So I think, you know, and to the point, you guys are absolutely right. You know, the investor should never be behaved and therefore be perceived like a boss. It should really be a genuine partnership. And just to elaborate on something that one of my colleagues here mentioned, you always have to think that the moment an investor comes on board, there is perfect alignment of interests between your interest as a founder and the interest of the investors. You know, it's only about success, going forward, accelerating, and ultimately generating a return, you know, so that's really important. What we try to do, we try to genuinely add value, and I like to always say, not add value just in PowerPoint, meaning, you know, kind of saying clever things in a board meeting, that's too easy, but doing things that contribute directly to the development of the business, whether it's entering new markets, finding new channels, finding new customers, recruiting a resource of a different caliber, our effort being on international expansion, and us having the 4 founders of Morphosis. We have between ourselves over 40 years of international experience. You know, we have a network in different parts of the world, and we really put all of that on the table for the benefit of the business. I think it's also important for an investor to know, and we try to do that, that sometimes the best way to add value is to get out of the way. you know, and you also need to think, if you think of the world from the perspective of a fund like ours, you're always having a portfolio of 7, 8, 9 companies or whatever it is. And therefore, there's always a fire somewhere, there's a crisis somewhere. So, you know, the best way to kind of get full independence is to continue to drive and deliver the business plan. And then, frankly, the interactions couldn't be more pleasant.
And David, your take on the relationship with the investor and the non-financial benefits?
So 2 important things I'd like to make. Like I would have loved to hear them 2 years ago. The first one is on, I would call it on education, on mutual education. Good investors are open to hearing about your business, they're open to learning about what it means and what you know better than them. And they will provide you with things they know better than you, and you should be open to that. And that is a hard thing to do. It sounds easy. Of course, they know, I'll learn it, it'll be great. It's a hard task to take your business and take on things that somebody knows better than you. That might mean some management elements, might mean some business elements. For example, an episode in our case, with Malin, that was very important in our formation was that we had a meeting, we spoke about worst case scenarios, how those are still pretty decent, about a typical case scenario and how that's looking pretty good. And we stopped there, and Malin asked us completely legitimately, where is your best case scenario? Where is your ambition? We said, we don't want to think about best case scenarios, that seems irresponsible, and we don't want to get dreamy about things. And he said, okay, go home, formulate the best case scenario, get in that headspace, then come back and we can talk about investment, because that's what it means. It means that you need to be open to that alignment of outlook. So in our case, it was boosting our ambition. That was rather lacking in that situation. And the second thing I think is very important about understanding about a relationship, what makes for a good relationship, is transparency. And that comes on a few levels. One is on a legal level. Good contracts make for good friendships. Having a contract that has everything on the table as it should allows you to well strategize on top of a proper relationship. The second point on transparency is that you have to understand, of course, as a startup, that the investors are not your parents. They're more like your wife or husband. You don't need to hide a bad grade from them, right, to avoid their punishment. If you're doing bad, they're doing bad, and you're doing bad together, and it's fine to tell them, we're doing bad, even if I happen to cause it. Let's see how we can fix. Because regardless how bad that feels to admit difficulties, failures, slowdowns, you're gonna get the best out of that relationship if that's on the table. And last but not least, personally, on personal transparency, they can smell the
bullshit, you can say.
Right, okay, cool. If you are unconfident about things and hiding it, if you're exaggerating things without truly believing them, all of that will be visible. Be honest about where you are, and be open to then calibrating your expectations and theirs, your perspectives. And with like full transparency and openness to education, I think, on both sides really, I think that's what makes for a great relationship.
I want to talk about your first point, the best case scenario, the ambition part. That's a great point. But this reminds me, so can you tell us why did you raise money? What were you trying to achieve? How are you using the money that you raised?
So essentially, the money we invested helps us. What it specifically did is it allowed us to, rather than without it, having launched a very primitive, incomplete form of the game, the first game we're launching, Interrogation, we would have launched a very unhappy, slow, late version, while this money allowed us to very seriously dev for a full year, as well as giving us some runway afterwards to get to our second game and getting cracking on concepting that. And the money allowed us to get this high-quality product coming out now in December.
And George, what about you? Why did you raise when you raised? Sergiu.
If you're talking about angel investment, we use those money to complete the team so that we launch our game faster and better.
Okay.
If you're talking about VC investment, then those money were used to scale the game.
How did you scale exactly?
How did we scale it?
Yeah, I mean, to scale the team to, you said you used the VC money to scale.
Scale the game.
To scale the game, okay.
Yeah. Ads and...
Okay. So basically marketing? Okay, cool. So I guess those are two key things that money get used for, production and marketing. Cool.
How did, with the VCs, because this is a lot of, there's a lot of urban myths, I would say, about attracting investment, especially from private equity and VC. Again, coming back to the general threat or being scared of opening your business, which I think in time it gets easier and easier to accept also the founders as part of your business family. And how are you now? How many years since 3TS invested in your business, since you got the VC investment, and how is your relationship now? Do you constantly remain in touch with them, or do they give you more freedom right now after a few years have passed since they've initially invested money? How is it going on?
Again, depends on each investor. I mean, there are investors that gives you more freedom. There are investors who give you not less freedom, who are more like willing to be there and help you. So each relationship is different. Depends on each case. We're lucky to have good investors, and we communicate. And the thing is, the more startups an investor has, it will be also more difficult for that investor to spend more time with you. So will choose probably the top performing ones or the worst performing ones to have their focus, to move their focus.
Yeah.
Maybe just one point to add, kind of talking to entrepreneurs in many places that work with funds, and I'm talking probably more established businesses here. Founders often complain about the fact that involvement from investors kind of comes in peaks, rather than having some sort of steady involvement along the way. That there's a lot of attention when the deal is made, and then in the early days, and then sort of investors move on to to other projects. And I think it's important to establish some sort of healthy ongoing level. And obviously there'll be crisis, and then all hands on the deck, and everybody will try to kind of help more or push more. But I think something that I know needs to be avoided by funds like us is to sort of have this scattered involvement in peaks, and then go silent for 6 months because we got busy on the next deal.
We're getting close to the end, and since we're getting close to the end, I want to talk about exits. What is as investors, can you tell us what you are looking for at an exit? What are good scenarios for you? What is your horizon? Just tell us what you're looking for when we talk about exits.
Okay, well look, as I said, it always goes down to looking at the sector dynamics. I was looking before coming here today, the gaming sector has attracted globally around $10 billion of investment in the last 18 months. There's good deal flow, there's lots of exits, there's companies going public, there's a lot of activity on the Warsaw Stock Exchange in our region. So as an investor, you always like to see this kind of liquidity. My thinking is that if a company is playing in a healthy sector, and if the company is successful, then in a way the exit will take care of itself. So I always say, let's obviously our duty as an investor is to have a clear point of view, but I tell founders, let's focus together on making this company really, really hot and cool and exciting. And then this is the biggest help you can give yourself from an exit point of view.
Okay, so similar thoughts on how to evaluate and to think about the exit. What I would add is that in our case, being a smaller player on the market, then sometimes extra success, it's actually a threat for us. So we need to carefully plan the exit strategy and give all our best to support the startup and the business to grow, but we need to sort of calculate a few steps ahead which is the best moment to prepare that exit, considering the type of business that we have in front of us.
From my point of view, I like exits, and I don't care how big they are. What I wanted to say is it happened many times. It happened several times to several of the startups I invested in that they got exit offers. And as an investor, I said that I cannot decide on that, because if the founder believes he can do more, it would be rather stupid from my point of view to say, no, you have to exit. And on the other hand, if he thinks he cannot do more than that, then why to tell him, yes, you can? I mean, he should exit if he thinks that's the right offer for him. So I don't think as an investor you have many things to say on pros and cons. What you can do is try to help in case it's needed.
Right.
I think as we're coming to the end, I will go back to the entrepreneurs and then final thoughts from the investors. But you've mentioned, both of you, basically about the power of meeting people, the human connections, going out and meeting as many people as you can, because probably sooner or later maybe you will meet the right guys to help you scale your business. But if you had one tip for people who are, I don't know, looking for financing, or they know that their business needs extra financing in order to grow, what would it be? And actually this is the question for you as entrepreneurs from your experience, and for investors. What is your tip of how they can reach you, or how they can grab your attention, or what they should do before actually coming to you? Whatever you think is the most valuable lesson for the entrepreneurs.
Maybe one of the most valuable lessons that I learned was that before signing the deal, you need to create a connection with your future partner. And it's funny that you say that like is your husband or wife. Well, getting investment is not a one-night stand. Mm-hmm. It's like a marriage. You need to know that person a little bit, maybe
take them out for coffee before, yeah.
Exactly. So, like one thing that we did for about 2 or 3 months before signing the deals, we're with Malin, we're doing monthly board meetings. Mm-hmm. Although there was no, we didn't have any contractual relationship, and during that time we find out what are the problems. He found out what are the problems of the company, what are the opportunities, and we found out how it is to work with that. With
how long
person.
did it last?
It took it was about 2 or 3 months. We met 6 months before we signed the deal. And in the first months, we like every month we met to, hey, here is an update, and hey, we're thinking about getting financing, hey, I might be interesting, what's the idea, oh, here is the idea, okay, we'll talk, what sounds reasonable, and now that things are looking more straightforward, let's do some board meetings, and that was really, really helpful because it built trust. And maybe one of the most important advices is that, not necessarily advice, the thing that helped me is start meeting investors before I really needed the money.
Exactly.
To build that those relationships.
I think that's a very valid point also from your point of view, that the investments do not happen overnight. that you need the time for the relationship. And David, what's...
So one thing I already mentioned was the persistence, the endurance, the grit. Another one would be to, as your outlook when looking for an investment, is to acknowledge and understand and take on that you're also interviewing your investor. You're also selecting your investor, which is why it's really important not to, at any point, if at any point you feel like you're tricking your investors into investing into you, that's already a red flag that you won't be happy in what is to follow, even if you get that investment. You want to put your problems on the table. You want to say, yes, I know it's a niche product. Yes, there is a dangerous competitor about to screw us. You want to put all that on the table because you want to find an investor that wants your problems, that understands your problems, thinks you and or them can deal with it, and is ready to take that on. If you hide things and trick an investor, you probably won't succeed, but even if you do, it will make for a bad relationship. So like in dating and marriages, put the problems on the table so that you know what they want from you and what you have to give them.
Mm-hmm. So trust, very important. Malin? Mm-hmm.
I believe it's good to go to these sort of events, conferences, whatever, meet people, talk to them. For us...
Thanks for that.
I
keep telling them that.
So this is the most normal way. Then in our case for Tech Angels, we are quite open in, there's a website, you can apply directly on the website, you can come to one of our events. In the end, we're a group of almost 50 people that are willing and that can invest into startups. So therefore, I think it's a good, assortment of investors there.
Yes, we think it's a great thing to have so many events actually, in which we believe that we have also an education role, and these meetups and the feedback that we can offer and get to understand more and more certain niches of businesses like the gaming industry enriches us and offers us new perspectives. So I think this climate is great for the entire startup and tech industry, and we hope to contribute more into making this shift from, let's say, we were seen as an outsourcing country, and to really add value and bring new businesses on the market that will bring more revenues and welfare in Romania.
Look, not that much to add really to what's been said. I think it's important for you guys to think that you play in a sector which is inherently global. There's no such thing as a Romanian gaming market. It doesn't exist. So I think, I wouldn't call it a tip, but the way I would think if I were you guys is to really try to find a unique angle, a cool product, an edge, something that differentiates you and makes you stand out, and to make that call knowing who else is out there way beyond the borders of Romania. From my perspective, I would just like to see more Romanian companies that become international success stories, and I think your sector has started to do that, and I'm sure we'll do a lot more, and we would love to be somehow part of that journey.
Excellent note to end on, I would say. We're out of time, so we won't be taking questions, but by all means, feel free to grab these guys to the side and pick their brains.
Or pitch the idea.
Thank you very much for being here today, and I hope you all find amazing success stories in the gaming sector in Romania.
Thank you.
Okay.